Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We hope you get a lot of value out of today's session and enjoy the content, whether you're watching this live with us today or on demand later. If you're new to design thinking or if you're looking to develop your innovation skills, you are in the right place today. If this is your first time joining us, Spring2 Innovation is a leading design thinking and innovation firm. We use design thinking, which is a people-centered approach to solving complex challenges to help our clients increase revenue, deliver better services, create future-ready policies, and get the right products to market faster. We help our clients do this through coaching, consulting, and training. And if you're interested in learning more, please visit our website or shoot us an email or message us on social media. And if you're looking for more design thinking thought leadership, please feel free to check out our past webinars, our YouTube channel, or our blog. There's lots of great content there. We'll drop the links below in the chat. Okay, let's get started. So in today's webinar, we're going to be introducing you to the concept of combining design thinking and change management, or as we call it, the power couple. Nilufer Erdebil and Ilana Gregory are our experts today. Nilufer is the founder and CEO of Spring2 Innovation. She's a recognized award-winning design thinking expert and a TEDx speaker. You can check out our TEDx talk, Design Thinking for Complex Environments, on YouTube, and we're also going to drop the link to that in the chat box. Ilana is Spring2's resident transformation and change management expert. She has spent over 20 years in the technology industry, leading teams in professional services, enterprise support, and field enablement in Canada and also across the globe. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Nilufer.
Welcome, everybody. Early in my career, I wanted to make a big difference. I still do. I actually got a job in a large organization in IT. After 2 weeks at the company, I finally got my laptop. And the person that handed it over to me was so proud of it. She said, "You're lucky you got it expedited." And I looked at her and I asked her, "Well, how long is the normal process?" And she said, "A month to 6 weeks." And I couldn't believe it. And fortunately, that ended up being my initiative, is to speed up that process. And so in order to tackle that, I went and found 4 or 5 leading edge technology companies to help me create a solution. It took us 7 months to implement this leading edge solution. And once it was built, then it took almost another 2 years to get people to start using it. Fast forward to 2.5 years later, and I actually had to use my own tool when I moved to a different department. Let's just say it was frustrating. Fortunately, I was able to go in and talk to the team that had taken over the implementation of the tools that I had created, and I was able to tell them some of my challenges in using it. If I'd known about design thinking and change management, I could have actually talked to the users beforehand to understand the type of solutions that they wanted to solve their problem. And with change management, gotten people to adopt and start using the tools even faster.
Yes, Nell, those aha moments can be really painful in the moment. And sometimes the aha doesn't come until there's that moment to reflect. What happened? That was such a great solution. It could have really helped them. I don't understand why I'm getting all this pushback, or worse, this radio silence. The only effort that's happening is looking at workarounds to my great solution. We're glad you could join us today. We're going to share some real examples and tips on how to improve that buy-in, overcome the resistance, and really unify the team around the desired outcome, leveraging the 2 human-centric approaches of design thinking and change management.
Hi, I'm Nilufer Erdebil. I'm CEO of Spring2 Innovation, and we specialize in innovation and design thinking for organizations, especially government and larger private sector organizations, working with large programs that span a number of organizations, businesses, departments, to smaller initiatives, helping define and refine challenges so it's easier to make decisions and take action on those decisions. We do this in a human-centered way, looking at different perspectives and bringing in different mind frames together.
Hi, I'm Ilana Gregory, and I'm a change and transformation strategist. I'm certified in both pro-sci change management as well as design thinking, and I leverage these 2 human-centered methodologies to help organizations drive that desired result of their change by increasing acceptance, adoption, and usage. Now let's take a moment and understand who's on the call with us today. So we're going to open up a poll. So you'll see that come up in Zoom. And we'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourself. So hopefully there's an option on here that you feel best reflects you. If not, click on the other, and we welcome you to put in the chat what that is. So we'll give you a couple of seconds to fill that out.
Yeah, are you in technology? Are you in policy, operations, HR, change management, innovation, program management? And we've left a spot for other if you don't feel like you belong to any of those. And so feel free to take another couple seconds if you haven't already done so. And we're seeing some good results right now. All right, perfect. And so I'm just going to end the poll here and share the results with you guys. And so thank you so much for sharing. So as you can see, we have a lot of folks that are in change management and innovation, operations, policy, technology. So that's really, really great to see. And then a few folks in program management and HR. So thank you for joining us. Let me just close this up. Now that you're here, what can you expect from the session today? What are you going to walk away with after this hour? What's in it for you? Over the course of this webinar, we're going to provide you with high-level overview of both change management and design thinking. And you'll have the tools for that elevator pitch for answering what it is and why it matters. Even more so, you're going to understand how these methodologies can benefit you specifically in your challenges or future opportunities and priorities.
That's right, Nell. The objective is for you to understand how these can help you expedite your progress or overcome hurdles that are standing in your way to achieve that desired outcome or result. Now, while both of these human-centered methodologies are really powerhouses in their own right, it's the combining them together. So the combining of change management and design thinking that truly becomes a superpower. That could be your superpower. So you're going to leave armed with great information, but even more so, we want you to know how to translate that information into action, into your superpower. So before we close out the webinar, we'll give you a few tips and insights into some next steps that you can take to translate this exciting new knowledge into ability. But before we go there, let's get a sense for impact for your current level of change.
While 2020 may be over, 2021 continues the trend of change. Most of us are still working remotely, managing our work remotely, and responsible to drive outcomes. Further progress on our priorities, all while being remote. And remote is not the only change. But before we dive deeper on that, let's take a step back and get a sense for change for all of you and how much change you expect to come. And so we're going to do a quick poll here. And so I want you guys to think about how much change do you expect in your life or work life over the next 6 to 36 months. So how much change do you expect in your work life over the next 6 to 36 months? So it could be work life, or life in general too. So the options are none, a few tweaks, moderate, too much to think about.
Often it can feel like too much to think about.
So you give you guys about 5 more seconds. Amazing. And I'm just going to end the poll and share the results here.
Yeah.
So too much to think about.
A lot of too much to think about. Yeah.
So what is driving that change? Is it innovation? Is it technology challenges and changes? Is it new leadership? Is it the pandemic? Is it lower costs?
So for this one, we're going to go over to menti.com and we should see if somebody could put the code in the chat one more time for everybody.
So it's 96846 if you guys want to participate. And so think about the amount of change that's been going on and what is driving that change. And you can put in something that we haven't mentioned before. We've mentioned innovation, we've mentioned technology changes, new leadership, the pandemic, trying to lower costs as we're trying to do even more with less, working virtually.
The pandemic seems to be coming up, new technologies, absolutely. Great to see innovation. Life, yes.
Yeah.
A lot of changes. Yeah, these are great. New leadership. Yep, with new leadership, lots of change.
Yeah, and so much adoption of technology with the pandemic that's been happening, which is really great to see, but also does mean a lot of change.
Great.
Organizational values, I really like that one too.
Yeah.
Working virtually.
All right. That looks great. All of these are fantastic. So when we think about these and all of this change that we're talking about, who's going to need to do something different? So who will be impacted? And when I mean who will need to do something different, so if you think about who is going to need to work differently or approach their work or life differently than what they do today, those are the people that are impacted. So this could be because there's a different system or a process, a new leader, a new team member, or some new individuals on the team, or in a new work environment from home, new family members. We're going to do another poll for this one. And for this one, you can select more than one. So it won't be a single selection. You can select all that apply. So let's launch the poll. And we'll give you a couple seconds to put something in. So it might be myself, my family, my team, another team, could be your boss that will be impacted, meaning they will need to do something differently. If this is something that will reach the citizens, so it could be Canadians that will need to do something different, a user, vendors, perhaps it's everyone that is going to be impacted that you see on this list, depending what those changes can be.
And remember, you can select multiple here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of great input around my team. Give you guys about 10 more seconds to put in your votes. Fortunately, we're able to see it before we can share it with YouTube, but as soon as we get everyone's responses, we'll be able to share it with you guys as well. So, so far right now, as we're looking at it, it seems like there's a lot of changes and a lot of people being impacted by it. So I'm just going to end the poll here and share with you guys.
Perfect. Yeah. Ooh, a lot of team and everyone other. Interesting. My family. So that's great. Well, it won't surprise you given who I see on this call and the answers that we just saw on the impact, that there's some recent research by ProSci that confirms what many of us already know or think. So really it's three things. Change is challenging and there will be resistance. Change is a process and people need to understand why. And thirdly, change happens at an individual level and it needs leadership. But the question's how. There's so much change happening. Much of it's happening at the same time, and the pace, the rate, the scale, it can all be even overwhelming. Just as overwhelming is the complexity, the breadth, and the reach. Think of all the teams, the groups, the individuals who are impacted or who need to be on board for this change. This could be another group, perhaps they have the data in their system. They own the system that has the data you need, or they own the relationship or the communication with the customers or constituents that you're trying to reach. It's a lot of change. When I think about concurrent change, and I can't help but think of, and that's perhaps because I have a federal government employee in my home, is the rollout of Microsoft Teams. So if you think back about a year ago, the federal government was rolling out a new system that they wanted to use for their teams, departments to interact, to engage, to collaborate with each other and across. Almost exactly at the same time, the pandemic hit, and suddenly those employees that were going to be having the system rolled out for them in the workplace were now working from home. Two big changes: new system for how they want to interact and engage, and new working environment. Now they're at home, trying to set up their new desk space or workspace. Now we won't do a poll here, but so just answer to yourself. If you were part of the Microsoft Teams rollout, when you received your first invitation to a Microsoft Teams meeting, how many of you only dialed into the audio? Because you weren't really sure what to do, perhaps. Maybe you did dial into the video, but you did not turn on your video. A lot of change, all happening at once, can make it really complicated to be successful or really know how to manage through that.
Before we jump into the how, I want you guys to think about a priority on your list today, a program, a policy, a service that you're creating, revising, or refreshing. It can be something big, or it can be something small. It could be long-term, or it could be short-term. So make sure you have a priority or project initiative in mind, and keep this example in mind as we go through the next sessions, throughout the sessions, and then we can talk about it. And so this is going to be as we talk about the how. And please feel free to write in the chat, what are some of the initiatives that you are going to be working on, programs, policies, or services? And so as you guys are writing that in the chat, I want to mention that we're going to be running through a number of thought provoker slides. And so feel free to grab a pencil or a pen or email it to yourself, write out your thoughts as we go through it, because we'll have several of the thought-provoking slides coming through. Some folks are going to be implementing Agile and implementing data literacy program. That's amazing. I love that. Others that want to talk about what they're going to be implementing? So feel free to keep writing in there. It's always nice to think about a particular initiative as we're talking about design thinking and change management together and overcoming obstacles and creating buy-in, so that you can think of specific things that you can do as we're going through the webinar. Oh, that's great. And so let's talk a little bit about the how. So here's where the human-centric methodologies help to improve that buy-in and overcome obstacles. So for design thinking, it's about what the real issue is. What are we going to create as the solution? And so design thinking is helping us understand what we're going to create. And change management is how we get acceptance and drive adoption and usage of the solution that we created. And so if we think back to the IT example, the real issue is that it could have been discovered with users, and they would have told us that it's not about the technology that they're using. They just wanted a tool that would help them do their job better and faster. And so again, with design thinking, it would have helped us understand what to solve. And then for the change management, it's that we didn't think of adoption until we had the solution completed and then noticed that people were delaying in accepting and adopting the solution even further. So if we'd used design thinking and change management right from the start, then it would have created a solution that people would use and been able to adopt a lot faster and easier. So next slide, please. In the words of Simon Sinek, let's start with the why. And so making sure that we're solving the real problems, so that it's about understanding the people involved. And when we understand the whole problem and work with the people involved in creating a solution and testing those solutions out, then we know that we're solving the right problem. The users are part of developing that solution and are on board before it's even launched. Secondly, it enables broader engagement and perspective, because we're talking to the different types of users that are going to be involved. And it increases creativity and innovation through working with different groups and creating multiple prototypes. It's about creating multiple options so that we can work with the end users to select the ones that suit them best. And it's also about facilitating easier decision-making and then therefore taking action on those decisions as well too. So now that we know the why, let's take a look at design thinking. Design thinking is human-centric, and it surfaces deeper and diverse perspectives and insights. It supports co-creation and facilitates aligned outcomes. And so in organizations, we're so good at jumping into solution mode, and it takes a little extra effort to pull back and think about what's the problem we're truly trying to solve. And then with design thinking, it gets us to pull back even further and think through who are the people that are involved in the problem, getting their different perspectives and their different challenges before we refine what that problem is, and then go into solution mode and prototype and then test. And design thinking is iterative, so you can go back to any step in the process along the way. This helps create solutions and better understand the people so that we know what we need to put in place, and then change management is going to help us adopt that. Next slide.
Thanks, Nell. Now that you have a high level of the why and the what of design thinking, let's take a moment and talk about change management. Change management. Is it really needed? Like, what if you have great project management? While project management is absolutely critical component when we're talking about successful project delivery, it focuses on the technical aspects, the what and the how. If you recall earlier, we discussed all those groups, those people who were going to need to do something differently than what they do today. Well, that's where change management comes in. It focuses on the people component, the who. Again, like design thinking, the focus is on people. Next slide, please. More importantly, change management provides that structure. So I know I want to focus on the who, but how? So it gives you a structured approach to manage people, so to help people go from how are they doing things today, transitioning all the way to how you need them to be working differently in that future state. And we need people to be doing something differently than what they do today to achieve those results. Change management increases our ability to achieve the results by getting people to adopt and use your solution. It helps us, you can call it capturing the human dependent component of the ROI, or the return on investment of your change.
Next slide, please. Think about projects where things didn't go well. What were some of the barriers to success? What would you say were the drivers or obstacles to that success? What went wrong? Perhaps it was something that should have been done or included, but wasn't. And feel free to put it in the chat too. We'll do this in the chat. So enter in as many as you'd like over the next 60 seconds. So in the next minute or so. And I know there's a little bit of conversation already going on that there had been some resistance to one of the participants in the project. And one of the things was, I guess, things had already been done the same way. And so there's a fear of technology. And so that's always a point. Culture, deeply ingrained counter to that change. People resistance. Yeah, and when we think about people resistance, there's something at a deeper level. What is creating that resistance or that barrier within the people that are there too? Feel free to put in more things into the chat, and we'll try to read as many as we can. Oh, one of the barriers is lack of understanding on the part of those who are being affected by the change. Yeah.
Yeah, or time. I see that time. I can feel like now I've got more to do. So what are we going to do? Culture. Yeah. It's a great one.
Yeah, culture can be a huge obstacle. Yeah.
Fear of the unknown. Yep. It's a great one.
Oh, yeah, lack of senior level support. So who's championing it? Who's responsible for it? Who's going to own it? That's often a really difficult one in larger organizations. Yeah, and then the need to keep things the way they are because it's always been done the same way. It's easier than learning something new.
Yeah, I think about that one all the time when I tell myself I'm going to eat healthier next week. It's great. Maybe day 1, day 2, I start to slip back. Maybe my lunch is cookies again. But yeah, it's not just starting to do something differently, but having that differently become my new current state. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, and sometimes people do think change management means death. Yeah, and job cuts. And I think there was a time where that's what it did mean to people, but it's how do we pull them out of that and shift their mindset. And you're gonna hear us talk a little bit about mindset in here too. And so design thinking is about understanding people's mindsets. And then change management is about helping people shift their mindsets. Yeah, the excuse that it's too expensive to make changes too. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's not necessarily the case too. No, those are really, really great. I'm gonna go to the next slide, please. And so we've all faced obstacles and sometimes even inadvertently created obstacles for ourselves too. And so there's a lot that's going on underneath all of this. For example, I remember when online shopping for groceries first became available, and I thought that it was going to be too hard and it's going to take too long. I think underneath the surface for me, it required changing habits. It required overcoming the fear that I wouldn't get quality produce or products. I wouldn't know what was on sale, or it would be more time consuming and more stressful. Now, after having tried it and done it repeatedly, I actually really, really like it. And in some stores, I actually prefer it to going there in person. But it took a little while for me to understand what my obstacles were and then to overcome those obstacles. And if we think back to the rollout of the Teams initiative that Ilana was mentioning, at the surface, it seems like it's the new technology or the ability or the knowledge, but underneath it, there's also other barriers. For example, people are at home or they're on the move, or they have kids and pets at home. Especially early on in the pandemic, maybe your hair wasn't done or it wasn't washed. You're working in an untidy work environment or an environment that you weren't as comfortable showcasing to others that you're working with. Sometimes people were working in their kitchen tables, or we even heard somebody that was working in their closet. And so like an iceberg, the danger is what's happening underneath the surface and getting to that and then removing those barriers. Next slide, please. Think back to the priority item that you guys had in your minds. So what are you working on? And do you foresee any obstacles or hurdles, resistance, lack of resources, timelines? Feel free to write in the chat. Maybe it's been tried before and failed, and people are telling you about it and how it has failed in the past. So feel free to write in the chat. Oh, there's a really good comment too, is that there's actually a lot of change, and lots of change can be frustrating too. That's definitely for sure.
Yeah, change fatigue, it's real. So if the initiative you're working on is one of many initiatives that are ongoing and they're going to impact the same groups, that could be absolutely an obstacle or create some resistance.
Yep, and then also lack of resources for sure.
Okay. Well, let's shift gears and think now about the how. So how do we overcome these obstacles or barriers? And when it comes to how, both of these methodologies, so design thinking and change management, come to the table with a full toolkit. So they're coming with you. We talked about that structure when we talked about the what. Here's some examples of the tools, and in and of themselves, incredibly powerful. But again, The real power is in knowing how to use them together, in combining them, in creating this power couple. Next slide, please. So we as I've seen in the chat, really reinforces something that we know that has been supported by research, which is that the #1 killer of success for our change is the lack of desire. Now you could say, well, what do you mean? Of course, we want to change. That's what we hear all the time. Oh no, I'm okay. I'm not change resistant. Well, often the we, when we talk about we want to change, is the big we. The organization wants to change. We want to shift. The team, the leadership. However, each organization, team, or leadership is comprised of individuals. So to truly succeed with change, so to get that desire, we have to figure out how to ensure there's desire for the change at an individual level. And this is where it can become complicated, because those drivers for desire and also those inhibitors for desire will be different for different people.
Earlier, when I was talking about the example from IT, I started out being the capital W, the capital E, we, and then became the small w, small e, and it was a totally different experience. Let's take a look at how design thinking can help. Desire is a perfect example of how the power of design thinking helps our change management be more impactful, helping with targeting the right message to the right people about the change in the right way. Design thinking, like change management, is focused on the people component of it. Design thinking is human-centric design. Humans are the who. In change management, we say who needs to do something differently. In design thinking language, we categorize those who into personas. Design thinking kicks off with empathy, defining the who and identifying their goals, fears, values, opportunities, or challenges. What is their problem to solve? And this is about getting into another's shoes and uncovering the problems, barriers, concerns that need to be addressed. These aren't the reasons for change. That's the organization has outlined. These are actually uncovering the answer to two questions, the why and the why not. The why includes things like the drivers and potential desire. The why not is about the barriers for desire. What are the groups or personas that'll be impacted by this change? What are their goals, challenges, opportunities, fears? How do they currently engage with the process, system, organization, or area being changed? This helps us to target the right message to the right group, to break down the barriers to desire and focus on the drivers for the desire for that persona. At a high level, this is designed and validated and tested through the remaining steps of the design thinking methodology.
And the power is not only one way. So change management also helps design thinking be more impactful and successful. Leveraging change management approach throughout the design thinking process ensures that you not only have the right level of buy-in, but so that you can get that sign up for the resulting design or solution, so that people agree with what is that you come out with. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive on the leveraging design thinking and change management. So think of this example I'm going to give you. I'm sure will resonate with many. How many times have you received that generic department email announcing some new system that's going to come into place? It's great. It will help you be more efficient, so you could be more effective in the work that you do. I imagine that within your organization, department, or team, that there are several different functions and different types of work. Not to mention different work being done by different people within those teams and at the various levels. So how is it that one system is going to make everybody more efficient when it probably requires something different for different roles, functions, or work? Already you can feel that resistance start to build. So in an effort to create desire for everyone using the same motivation and message, we have not only failed at creating desire, we've actually started to create some resistance, some obstacles to our success. This is where design thinking is incredibly powerful because it ensures that we are delivering the right message to the right group at the right time. How? By doing three things: empathizing, engaging, and empowering. Knowing who is impacted, and I saw that in the chat pod, understanding who the people are that are going to need to do something differently, that's really where it starts, because now using that empathy stage in design thinking, we can start to build out an understanding of each of those groups, including insights about their challenges, fears, opportunities, values. And these are the golden nuggets that are going to help you to create desire for the change, but they're also going to be the nuggets that are going to help to ensure that in your plan, you are ensuring the right knowledge, skills for ability, training, and reinforcement are going to that group. When we think about our activities, say on social media or online retail, for me, I often think about the term personalization. I want it to be personalized or targeted for my taste. Let's shift personalization to this context, change. Now we can target our efforts more effectively. Therefore, we're building credibility, buy-in, and support. And by doing this, soon it won't only be us advocating or supporting the change, but it enables us to really build out a coalition of support by ensuring that we're defining and solving the right problem or challenge or opportunity for each of the impacted groups. That's another thought provoker.
Yeah, next slide, please. As you think back to your chosen priority example, the thing that you're working on, do you have a clearer view of who will be impacted? For example, who's going to need to do something differently than what they've done or what they're doing currently today as a result of the initiative? The people using your systems, users, and additional stakeholders, like those implementing the solution or the service. And keep in mind, there's a slight difference there too, is the users are the people that are going to be using it. And then stakeholders might be those that are implementing the solution, that are championing it, that are supporting it or sponsoring it. Feel free to write in the chat. And so these could be Canadian citizens, it could be another team, another business, analysts, other government departments, customers, other levels of government. So feel free to chat in, to write in the chat there too. Yeah, stakeholders and users, it's a major overhaul. Yeah, definitely. So think about who's going to need to do something differently than what they do today. So there's a comment in here, users entering data and analysis and executives. Yeah, they're going to have to do things differently. So everyone who's using the data, and yeah, and data is such a big component that's being added into our lives now, super valuable, but it also shifts up how people are going to be behaving going forward too. So as you guys are thinking about that, feel free to write more in the chat. We also want you to think about what is your current level of engagement with those impacted, and who does that engage, what does that engagement look like? So what is the current level of engagement with those impacted, and what does that engagement look like? End users, training, support teams, dev, tech teams. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, it's really helpful to keep those in mind as you guys are starting to think about and develop the solutions. Next slide, please. So in order to leverage change management with design thinking, the first thing you want to do is create awareness. Then consider facilitating that desire, and then building advocacy for outcome. Communication, from emails being sent to participants that are participating in that design thinking session or sessions, to keeping folks aware of what the work is that's being done. Change management and how you engage with stakeholders is key. And it's not really talked about when you see articles about design thinking, but it's a challenge that we come up with every single time that design thinking is being implemented, especially when design thinking is new to an organization. And then that's when creating awareness and facilitating that desire are super key. And understanding that we can bring in change management to overcome that is a big driver that enables you to be more successful. Sometimes we need to build out advocates for outcomes, even with people not in the room and not even taking part in the design thinking initiative. And that's where change management helps us out even more. Building out great solutions with end users still requires support of change management to start to get everybody to use the solutions and ensure that they have what they need to be successful.
So when you think, let's go to our next thought provoker. So when you think about what you're working on and you think about the other groups, those that are impacted, but also other stakeholders, how aware are others of what you're working on? And more importantly, do they understand why you're working on it and why it's a priority for you? So starting with that why, that's always a great question. We can really get into our own work and we understand why it's important, others don't. Same the other way around. What about their priority list? So does what you're working on show up on their priority list? If so, where? And if they agree that this is a priority and that they understand why you're working on it, do they also agree with how you're planning to get there? So on that solution, the what? As you're thinking about this, yeah, I think the information's available, but sometimes not everybody has the same level of understanding. So on that note, think about who is currently supportive of what you're working on in the priority and the why, and who needs to be. And as you guys are typing that in, I'm going to kind of give you the summary as you're thinking about who needs to be aware. Are they aware? How aware are they? More importantly, are they supportive? And do you need them to be supportive? I'm going to move on to the next slide. The key is if you are failing to engage with the people that are impacted, you are ensuring you're going to create resistance. And with that, you are putting at risk the outcome and the results that you're looking to drive with your initiative. Whether this is rolling out a new org structure, a new system, changing up the chore wheel at home, which I'm experiencing right now. If we don't engage with those people, you are ensuring you're creating resistance and it is at risk for being successful. So considering who's on this call, I want to do another poll. And I want to understand, because I saw lots of change management, and based on the comments, it looks like there's probably elements or even more that are familiar to many of you. Are these methodologies currently being leveraged in your organization? So we're going to take a couple seconds to do the poll, and interested to understand, are you using change management or design thinking at work? Perhaps you're already using both, or maybe you're not using either. So just take a moment and fill that in. This is just to understand where you currently are, not necessarily where you want to be, but what is currently being used within your organization. So change management, design thinking, both or neither. And I saw a lot of change management in the chat pod, so we'll expect some numbers there. So that's great. Can we share out the results? Oh, almost half of you using both. That's fantastic. A little bit. Interested to know, maybe in the chat, you can say whether you're using them together or not. That would be great to understand. Thanks. Now I'm going to ask, let's take a crystal ball. So we've had about half of us are using them, maybe not together, not using them enough. If you were to have a crystal ball and you could look into the future of your organization or your work environment, and you were using change management, design thinking, the power couple together, what are the kinds of adjectives or descriptors you could come up with what that would look like? So what impact would it have on innovation or change in your organization if you use them together? Getting the right people to participate is difficult. So let's see if maybe, what kind of adjectives? Would you find that it's seamless? Would you see less resistance? Better problem definition. That's excellent. Yeah, that's a key part of design thinking. I find often, even with change, not understanding what the problem is that we're solving, the why. If we can't get that clear, it's really hard to create desire. Enabler, I love that. Smooth, seamless, great. Empowering. I like that one. You can continue to put those adjectives in. I love all of them. And I'm going to let you continue with the slides now.
Thanks. So from today's discussions, we got a lot of great comments around not everybody having that same level of understanding, people worrying that change is going to lead to increased workload. So as you guys are thinking about design thinking and change management, what are additional questions or targets you've come up with as it relates to your priority or your initiative or your policy? And I think we covered a lot of them, but if there's more, feel free to add them in. And then consider, have you created another to-do list? Do you know what to do with all of this now? So back to our comments, have you actually increased that workload? We've introduced you to two powerful methodologies, change management and design thinking, and using them together. And so that together they can further enhance your ability to achieve your results with greater acceptance and adoptions. So what's next? Let's help you take that interest and transform it into knowledge, skill, capability, and to apply it. Next slide, please. And so we've talked about a lot of things today. And so we want to make sure that you're able to get a deeper understanding of each of the different methodologies and then having them work together, discovering the tools more in depth, and to be able to practice and apply these. And so next slide, here's how we can help to address some of the blind spots and address that to-do list. So through knowledge, the ability to tackle proactively, we want to be able to increase adoption of programs, policies, and projects, and to learn the framework and the tools to be able to scale that impact and that expertise. It's about leveraging a common language and the frameworks so that you're working together, plus that mindset. And so it was mentioned a little bit earlier, but mindset is a huge component of both design thinking and change management. How do you adopt it? And then how do you get those around you to adopt it as well? And we've lined up a series called the Getting Started series, where we have 4 90-minute sessions per course. And so 4 sessions on design thinking, 4 sessions on change management, and then 4 on the power couple. And as with everything, it's virtual. And so you don't need previous experience in either design thinking or change management, but if you do have that experience or that training, it's going to help you get a little bit more in-depth understanding of it and to gel those tools and thinking together as you're thinking about applying these methodologies to complement one another. And additionally, it's going to be helping strengthen your mindset. So if you do want to learn more, next slide, please. You can feel free to check out our website at spring2innovation.com on the Getting Started series, or feel free to reach out to us either through email or social media. And with that, I want to open it up with the Q&As.
Wow, thanks, ladies. That was a lot of information. So we do have a little bit of time left to take some questions. If you haven't already, please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I saw quite a few questions come in. So let's start with this one. Nilufer, I think this is for you. Ideally, we start with design thinking, problem definition, etc. Do you have any tips for incorporating these concepts when the project is underway? So for example, a solution decided and already being developed.
Yeah, design thinking is ideally used when that solution hasn't been decided, but sometimes we do actually get called in when a solution has been decided and things aren't going well. And so that's when you definitely want to bring in design thinking. Often with projects, we're so set on getting the projects done on time and on budget, we forget to take a look at some of the cues and signals that we're getting, the feedback that we're getting from around us, either from the user, from the environment, from leaders, from the shifts that are happening. And so design thinking as a project is already going on is about incorporating that feedback back in and asking ourselves, what does that mean about our users? How are they changing? How have they shifted? I know in the private sector, there's been a lot of rethinking, reframing, and pivoting going on, because models that have worked really well in the past can no longer work the same way. And so design thinking is about taking a look at how have the people shifted as you've gone through and you're in that development phase. And then the other part of it is design thinking can be very helpful as you're considering change management to understand the people better and to be able to communicate with them as the project progresses throughout.
Okay,
Ilana,
great. Ilana, I think the next question is for you. So someone in the chat had asked, how do you manage the constraint that deadlines exercise on a project? So we were talking about information being available, but not everyone's understanding it at the same level at the same time. So how would you recommend someone handles the constraints that deadlines have on a project?
Well, I think that's really where we talk about that coalition of support. So change management isn't just about making sure everybody is happy. It really involves, like we talked about the tools, there are some actual structured plans that you would put in place that you align with the project schedules. When we talk about things like communication or having the right message at the right time, that will be critical, as will the resistance management plan, because if things aren't going well, we want to be able to identify that really quickly and act on it. So with change management, that will help you, like, what do we do if we're going off schedule, if we're going off time? Having those plans in place and aligned with the project schedule will actually help the project stay on time.
Oh, smart. Good idea. We have a couple more questions. So Ilana, this would be for you. When is the best time to start change management in my organization?
Well, I'd say right at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
We want to understand what, and often people will say, well, we need to have a project to start with change management. And I agree, when you talk about the tactical plans for your initiative, you need, when we say why, you need to have a what that the why is about. But I would say earlier, because often, and I saw this in the chat, culture, I hear this all the time, well, we don't have a change culture or we have change fatigue. So I always recommend start earlier. It's almost like you're priming the pump and making sure that you're starting to build out that common language and understanding around how we're going to approach change as an organization. That way, when the initiative is in place, everybody feels a little bit more comfortable because they understand how you're going to get there. They understand there's a roadmap and how that roadmap works, versus there's a change coming and nobody understands how it's going to roll out. So starting to build out that mindset and build out that common language early is always an advantage.
and if you don't mind, I'm just going to add that in general, people like change that they are putting in place themselves. It's the change that others are imposing on us that's the most difficult part. And so, for example, if you're going out to buy a new car because you want a particular style or you're really into cars, that car buying experience is amazing. Whereas if your car broke down, you don't have enough funding, or you didn't think you needed the funding for the car and you have to get a vehicle, then it's not a fun process. And so change is a lot about the perspective and getting inside the minds of those people to understand what would make it more desirable or how they think, so that you're able to solve those issues too, makes that change desirable. And then that's what makes things a lot easier going forward.
Absolutely. I love that example about the car.
So we have another question for you, Ilana. A little bit, you had mentioned about starting right at the beginning of a project, starting change management right at the beginning. What does early change management look like without having a specific project?
So I would say early change management is really about creating a change or growth mindset in the organization. So first is having a change strategy. So how are we going to approach change? What methodology are we going to use? So I mentioned that I was certified in the ProSci, so the ADKAR method, and you saw that in one of the slides, but there are other change management frameworks or methodologies. It's really helpful as an organization if you've agreed, okay, this is the strategy we're going to use, this is the framework we're going to use. Also, even assessing how much competency you have across the organization in change management will be helpful, because then you will know, okay, these can be my go-tos for change champions. But really, it starts with that growth mindset, creating that common language and a strategy at an organizational level. It does come top down.
And that, and you mentioned briefly earlier too, that stakeholder mapping. is really helpful earlier on in terms of figuring out who you need to communicate to, how much, how frequently, so that even right from the get-go, there's a positive energy about the initiative because people are aware of it and will continue to support it. And it'll also help you bring on more champions along the way too, if more people are aware of it and are getting the information that they need in the way that they want it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I have another question here. Some resistance to change is that change is imposed, is completely nonsensical, and will clearly not lead to efficiencies. It wasn't thought out well at all. How do we embrace change in these cases? Ooh.
I think that's the starting with the why. So I think at that Simon Sinek, start with why. If we looked back at the research that ProSci came with and said, hey, it's challenging, it's a process, and people need to understand why you're doing it. This is where the design thinking piece is so helpful, because that why might look a little different for the different groups that are impacted. So when I gave that example of the generic email, which we see all the time, where it could be like one senior leader sends out this one email to everybody, who's going to have the most credibility? Probably their direct manager, and how it's going to impact each group probably looks a little differently. So at the highest level, it may mean greater efficiency for the organization, but for my group, it might mean I have to do something differently. And if I don't understand why I have to do it differently, then immediately I start to dig my heels in, because it means more work for me because I have to now change those habits. And it feels like that word nonsensical, not essential, just overhead really comes in. So really understanding that why is critical.
Okay, thank you. So we have 2 more questions, but we've only got 3 more minutes. So let's see if we can get through them. So the first one is, can I start, this is for you, Nil, can I start doing design thinking if the project has already started?
Yeah, I think we kind of covered that for sure. And so design thinking can be started at any point. I think the keys of design thinking are understanding your end users and then getting them to help you create prototypes and options and testing out your options with your end users. And so absolutely you can use it at any point. We recommend not using it when you have a solution in place, but if there is a willingness to change and adjust that solution to better suit the needs of clients, then definitely go for it.
Okay, great. And the last one, which I think you've touched on a little bit, how do I know when to use design thinking and change management?
Yeah, so those are, I think it's all, are you going to need to do something differently? The question I was asked is, am I trying to add value in any way? And if I'm trying to add value and have people do something differently to add that value, whether it's creating a new solution or design, or changing an organizational structure, or creating a chore wheel at home, the tenets of change management and design thinking absolutely apply. It's more challenging to answer the question is, when wouldn't you use it?
Yeah, I like that.
Anytime there's people involved, that's what I hear you guys say all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're at our time for today. We want to thank everybody for joining, and thank you to Nilufer and Ilana for today's session. If you'd like to learn more, please visit spring2innovation.com. So thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.